Good afternoon, friends. We are here to hear Reetika Khera ma'am. Reetika Khera ma'am is a development economist. Currently, she is an associate professor at Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, Indian Institute of Technology, New Delhi. She was an associate professor in the Economics and Public Systems group at the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad from 2018 to 2020. So I heartily invites ma'am for her talk.
Okay, so let me start by thanking Sheetal for the invitation and also Himanshu for putting everything together. It's always nice to come to APU. I've been coming for many years now, and I think but this is the first time I actually come to this campus and see it in this form, which is obviously very... Okay, fine. All right. So now you know my name and you know that I teach at IIT Delhi. What I thought I'll do is maybe talk a bit less and then keep more time for questions, because it was hard for me to guess what kind of backgrounds you all come from and what kinds of interests you have. So what I'm doing is I'm sharing a little bit of the work that we have done over the past few years, but also a little bit of what I think could be done, should be done, what are the things that I feel that one needs to worry about in terms of this question of food security. So starting with the nuts and bolts, it's very difficult to fully delineate what food security is. Depending on where you come from, you might focus on one particular aspect. So I certainly don't focus on issues related to production and trade. Yeah, so I've done very little work on agriculture and agricultural practices, although obviously that is very crucial to ensuring food security. And I have done next to nothing on trade-related issues. All of my work has been on the distribution side of things, especially in terms of government support. What is the government's role been in ensuring food security? In the most basic definition kind of way, which is that people should not sleep hungry. But even for those of us who work on food security from this very narrow perspective, it's very evident that this approach of ensuring that nobody sleeps hungry is hardly enough, right? When you talk about food security, what you want is also naturally nutritional security as well, that the food should be nutritious. There have been some fledgling efforts on the part of the government to also think about nutrition in their interventions on food security. But like I said, these are very fledgling, very basic attempts, and even those have faced a lot of resistance, and we'll talk about those as we go along. Right. So I think I've covered mostly what I wanted to say on this slide. When we talk about food and nutrition security, it's important to remember that even in terms of the government's perspective, a lot of this the conceptualization should begin from the mother's womb. Because, and I guess I'm talking as much about my own trajectory in terms of research as about what is being done. My first interest in these issues was at the time of my PhD, when I did a survey on the public distribution system along with some other interventions. But that is in some ways too little and too late, right? Because if you're concerned about nutrition, then we know that now we know, or we have known for a long time, that the time that a child spends in her or his mother's womb is actually going to set the roadmap in a very substantial way, not entirely, but in a very substantial way for the rest of that person's life. If you look at our expenditures, in terms of the government expenditure on food security programs, the bulk of it is on the public distribution system. It's a huge, this year I think it's supposed to be close to 2 lakh crores because it includes the subsidy or the expenditure on the part of the government to buy grain at minimum support prices from farmers, and then so that's the production subsidy that the government incurs, and then on the other side they have the distribution subsidy. They buy it at 18 or 20 rupees a kilo or 30 rupees a kilo, and they sell it to poor people or people who have ration cards for 1 or 2 or 3 rupees a kilo. So that's another part of the subsidy that the government has to bear. If you look at other programs of government support, actually, when you start paying attention to it, you find that there are more and more. And even this is just a very partial map, I would say, because, and the reason why I picked these is because these are some of the programs that we have looked at in some detail. But even in this very partial map, you can see that there is a bit of a life cycle approach here. So it starts with maternity entitlements, which is a cash support program for pregnant and lactating women. So this is supposed to, it's a relatively new intervention. It was part of the National Food Security Act in 2013. And nothing happened till 2016, 31st December, when finally the Prime Minister announced that they would give cash to pregnant women. And it was operationalized in mid-2017. Then there's the Integrated Child Development Services Scheme, which is an older program going back to the 70s, starting in Tamil Nadu. And often you'll find that a lot of the good interventions in the realm of social policy will trace their roots back to Tamil Nadu. So in fact, even maternity entitlements, Tamil Nadu has had the Dr. Muthu Lakshmi Reddy scheme, I don't know, but at least going back 30, 40 years, if not even more. And that's a much better, I mean, the provisions that are made for women under the Dr. Muthu Lakshmi Reddy scheme are much better than the National Food Security Act, which created the scheme called the Pradhan, Mantri, Matru, Vandana, Yojana. So ICDS is a scheme for children who are under the age of 6. It includes something like a preschool facility. It's a place where children get food, but they also get some preschool education. They get basic health services like immunization. There's growth monitoring, so their weight and height are supposed to be measured regularly. And it's a scheme that's very well envisioned in the sense that it was understood early on that all of these things are interrelated. Health, education, and food or nutrition cannot be thought of as separate silos. These things reinforce each other, and you need all of them to come together in some fashion. And the ICDS is a scheme that at least envisions it really well, and of course the implementation varies by state, but we can talk about that. Then for school-going children, there's my most favorite midday meal program. It's the most joyful, actually even ICDS now, it's the most joyful experience you can have if you ever travel to rural India, and perhaps in some parts of the country, even in urban India, these schemes are functioning quite well. I've not worked that much in urban India myself, but it's a real joy to see children coming together to eat, and I think some of us have experienced it. You're not children really, but some of the students here have experienced some of the joy of cooking and eating together. You know, there is something quite special about sharing a meal, even if you haven't cooked it, but even just the act of sitting together and sharing a meal in that sense, it creates a particular kind of bond, which I think is quite precious, especially for school age groups. Then there's the PDS, which is in a sense perhaps something that people know about. It provides, across the country, it provides grain, food grain, at least rice or wheat. But in some parts of the country, in addition to this, they also provide nutritional food items like dal in Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh. I don't know if Karnataka is part of this southern. So there is a pattern, which is that the southern states tend to do better on these programs than the North Indian states. Karnataka, I feel a bit tentative to pat on the back, because I've not done much fieldwork here myself. I know that the midday meal scheme is very good, but in the PDS, I'm not so confident because I just don't know enough. And in terms of whether the nutritional basket is varied, like Tamil Nadu and Kerala and Andhra Pradesh, also I'm not entirely sure. But in most of North India, the PDS is only about giving wheat or rice. 5 kg per person per month is what people are entitled to. In addition, some states are giving iodized salt and things like that. But basically, the PDS means gehu chawal in North India. Then there's the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, which ensures food security in a very different way, in the sense of providing employment or providing work where the government steps in as the employer of the last resort, and putting money in their hands so that they can fend for themselves. So it's not really a welfare program, it's more like a workfare program where you allow the able-bodied to go and on their own. And in some cases, of course, there are examples of how this has also led to asset creation in rural areas. In fact, one of the things in Jharkhand that has been studied is at one point when Jharkhand had president's rule, it was said that it was ordered that only wells will be made through NREGA. And in that phase, there were lots of failed wells because there was pressure and, they were sanctioned without thought. But there were many successful wells as well. And people around those areas, living around those areas, were able to then have some irrigation water to grow some vegetables. And sometimes those vegetables were grown for self-consumption, and then at other times they were also able to sell in the local market or more widely. So in that sense also there is a potential for ensuring food security through the NREGA, not just by providing a livelihood or some income income support to people, but also by creating more opportunities for better or more agricultural activities locally. Another thing that's right now being studied, so we don't really know how well it's going, but apparently it's not so bad, is that there was a lot of orchards that were created. So mango plantations have been undertaken in Jharkhand, and apparently the survival rate of the saplings has been quite reasonable, like around 10% only died. And I think in the next 2 or 3 years, and in some places actually they've already started selling on the market as well. And then finally, there are old age pensions, social security pensions, actually not just old age, but also for single women, widows, and for persons with disabilities. It's a very small amount. Again, this is a way of putting cash in people's hands. These are old people or persons with disabilities or people for other reasons who can't go out and work. And so you help them along by giving them some subsistence money. The central government's contribution, I will treat whoever gets the amount right to something after this talk. Do you know what the central government, Bhakti and Vivek are not allowed to answer, but the others can say, do you know what the central government might be giving as pension through this scheme? It's the National Social Assistance Program. Correct. Okay, fine. All of you get a treat from me. Worth 200 rupees. Okay, so what have we been doing? We've been trying to study all of these programs. And one of the reasons why we want to study these programs is because if you are from the kind, I don't know how diverse the student population at Azim Premji University is, but certainly my own life, even though I am at an institution that has a great deal of diversity because we have reservation policies, etc. But a lot of the time we are in a bit of a bubble, and to the extent that you hear about these schemes at all, what you will hear is that they don't work. Yeah, that they are cesspools of corruption and that the food quality is bad, or that a lizard fell into the cooking pot, or, that in the PDS so many tons of wheat or rice were swindled by somebody, etc. And so we were obviously curious, we are curious to find out what is happening actually as far as these schemes are concerned. And I think there are 2 or 3, well, I'll keep adding the number of important things that we've learned. One is that the experience is very varied across the country. That it's very difficult to say, give one statement that would be by and large true across the country. So like I said a little while earlier, the southern states tend to do better than the North Indian states, by and large, broad strokes. And the other important thing is that what we have noticed, especially in the PDS, ICDS and midday meal program, is even states that did very badly on implementing these programs have actually managed to turn them around quite remarkably. Yeah. So in the PDS, one very well-known case now is Chhattisgarh, but the other also equally successful state, I would say, is Odisha, where the leakage levels used to be upwards of 50%. Yeah, so more than 50% of the grain that was meant for ration card holders was not reaching people. This was until the early 2000s or even the mid 2000s. But one after the other, the states began to figure out how to fix this broken system and were able to do it successfully. So around that time, the early successes were from Odisha and Chhattisgarh, which brought down the leakages to less than 10%. So now 90% was reaching. There was only 10% mismatch. And then we found that it was also improving in states like Jharkhand and Bihar and Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. Yeah. UP, in our latest surveys, UP was bypassed by this reforming trend. But even Bihar, I'm saying, because Bihar was at one point, Bihar had a 90% leakage problem. I don't have that graph here, but like till 2007, only 20% of the wheat or rice used to reach ration card holders. I remember this one time that I actually did go to, I used to avoid going to Bihar because it was so depressing. But then things began to improve. We asked one person who was one of the respondents in our survey. We said, I don't know if everyone can follow some basic Hindi, but we said, "Aapko गेहूं चावल मिलता है कोटे का?" And he said, "हाँ मिलता है." So we said, "कितना मिलता है?" "दिवाली और होली पे मिलता है." So like they were getting their grain twice a year on Diwali and Holi, when actually they were supposed to get it every single month. And they didn't even know, like they thought they were getting their grain. Yeah, so awareness levels were a big part of the problem. The lack of awareness of people's own entitlements, when that came around and when people began to understand, they themselves became very vigilant and started pushing back against the corruption. So anyway, let me come back to this slide just to give you a sense of what we've been studying. So on the top, you can see that it's almost as if we suffer from an OCD because almost every year we try to organize one survey. And of course, some of the students who have participated in these surveys, actually one of them is a faculty member here now, and one is a student who's just finishing her studies. So we've worked with a lot of students over the years, every year anything between 20 to 80 or even 100 at times, who have participated in these surveys. We organize a training for 2 or 3 days, and then the teams go in smaller groups of 4 or 6 max, and they go from one village to the other with the questionnaire that they've been trained to use, and to figure out what is happening with these programs. So Antyodaya is one of the ration card types of the public distribution system. It's the yellow card in many parts of the country. It's for the poorest of the poor. Midday meals, ICDS, National Food for Work program, NFFWP, was the precursor to the NREGA. So it was started on a trial basis before they said, we'll think about the act after we have whether this trial thing runs or not. Then NREGA came about. Then, of course, in 2011, we did a big survey on the PDS where we were asking people specifically, we were most interested, apart from documenting the corruption, we were most interested in finding out about whether people preferred food or cash. Yeah, this was a big thing at the time. The UPA-2 government had come back to power, and the Congress, which was leading the UPA-2 government, had promised in its manifesto that we will bring a National Food Security Act. And when it came to delivering on that promise, they were saying, let's do cash. Let's get rid of the PDS. There's too much corruption. We've tried for so many years. Corruption isn't going away. It's time to try cash transfers. And we were a bit concerned about this. And a lot of other development economists were on the same page as the political parties. But some of us were a bit concerned. And we thought, let's go and try and understand what that would mean in the rural context in some states. Then the Peep Survey was a survey of all these 5 programs. It stands for Public Evaluation of Entitlement Programs. So it was a peep into rural India. And we studied these 5 programs. Then in 2016, after the NFSA, the National Food Security Act, the PDS part of it had been rolled out everywhere. We went to 5 states to see whether that had made any difference. In 2017, we did a study of the integration, the forced integration of Aadhaar and Aadhaar-based biometric authentication into the PDS, only in Jharkhand. So it was a small study because Jharkhand had made it compulsory by then. So we wanted to see the impact of that. And then there was a break, and then we did the JABS survey. JABS stands for Jacha Bacha survey, which was basically a survey of the Pradhan, Mantri, Matru, Vandana, Yojana, which is the maternity entitlement scheme that I just talked about. So what's interesting, I mean, apart from this broad sketch, which goes almost 20 years, what's interesting is that these programs are a mix of cash and kind. Yeah, that there is space for both kinds of interventions. And both we find serve a very useful purpose in the lives of poor people or people who are at the margins. And now, today, the situation is that some of them have become legal entitlements, but not all. So Social Security pensions, which we were pushing for inclusion in the National Food Security Act, didn't actually make it. And community kitchens were not part of it, where I think that was a very sad sort of missed boat opportunity also, because if it had been put in place, then we may not have seen the kind of situation that we saw during the pandemic with migrant workers being stuck in urban areas, if community kitchens had already been functional. So for the rest of the talk, I thought, instead of going into the nitty-gritty of what we learned or, what these schemes are doing, I mean, that will come by the by. I thought I'd probably focus a bit more on what are the worries we see as far as these programs are concerned. So the 2 main children's programs are the ICDS, where the services are delivered through Anganwadis, and the Midday Meal program. Both of them are in very serious danger because of the budget cuts that they have experienced. So until recently, I won't name a year, but until recently, the norm was for us to make a bit of a ruckus and for the budget to be revised upwards on a year-to-year basis. The upward revision generally was barely sufficient to account for the inflationary pressures in the intervening year. Sometimes it went beyond that as well. Now what has been happening is that forget a nominal increase, there has been actually budgetary cuts. So you're not even able to keep the allocations in nominal terms, stable. What you're seeing that even in nominal terms, the money support has been reduced. And what that means in the time of inflation is that very hard-won victories for little children are now being lost. And, because they are invisible, children are not likely to make a noise for themselves. This is kind of slipping through our hands. One important victory, I would say, in the in the decade before the one that's going on, was, at least a partial recognition that we have to give nutritious food to children. And the addition of eggs was very important. So eggs are a superfood, according to me and according to many others. They're a superfood because they have all the nutrients that we need, except for vitamin C. And if you boil, I love to say this, if you boil an egg and you squeeze some nimbu on it, some lime on it, then you have your vitamin C also sorted out. They're especially important in these settings because eggs have a long shelf life. Yeah? There are many other sources of animal protein or protein which would not be suitable for a lot of rural areas, like milk, for instance. Yeah, that may not work in rural areas because it's likely to spoil if there aren't adequate refrigeration facilities. It's relatively cheap. So if you think of comparable sources of protein, whether dal or chicken or any other animal protein, eggs are very affordable. And they can't be diluted. The problem with things like dal and milk, even though they are equally nutritious, is that when they have been introduced in the menus, they tend to get diluted. So the dal will be very watery, and the milk also, you must have seen that video. I think the video went viral on Twitter. And I think that guy just died 2 days ago. So Pawan Jaiswal, the journalist who blew the whistle on the dilution of milk, he passed away 2 days ago of cancer. But at that time, he was persecuted by the state, and I think he was put in jail also, or at least there was an FIR against him. So with these other possibilities, there are all kinds of problems. Eggs are eminently doable, but there are two big problems. One, of course, now is that these budgetary cuts have come along, but even if the budgetary cuts were not there, one of the problems is the vegetarian lobby, which has been stalling the introduction of eggs for a very long time. And it used to be my favorite story, but I think I have to now stop telling it, and I'm quite happy to stop telling it, that Karnataka was one of the states where Akshay Patra was stalling the introduction of eggs in the midday meal program. I think that has changed now because in the northern 7 districts, I think, finally eggs have been introduced. And there was a big report in the Indian Express very recently actually saying how everyone is very happy with the introduction of eggs. And I think the teachers also reported an improvement in children's attendance because of eggs being included in the midday meals. What was really interesting about the Karnataka Akshay Patra story, which makes it worth telling even now, even though eggs have been introduced, is that Akshay Patra actually supplies midday meals only to about 10% of the schools or 10% of children, school-going children in the state. In spite of that, they were able to bully the state government, and whether it was Congress or BJP didn't matter. Whoever it was basically then, going down on their knees before the bullying behavior. On the other hand, Karnataka has always has for a long time given eggs in the Anganwadi program, in the ICDS. And in the ICDS, the Akshay Patra Foundation or whatever it's called does have a presence, but it's even smaller than the midday meal program. It's not even 1%. But the power of Akshay Patra is so strong because, if you should all try this out at some point. If you use Google as your search engine and if you search midday meal, you can do it now if you like. See if you get an ad on the site. If you don't have ad blockers, see if you get an ad for Akshay Patra. They are promoting themselves big time. And they have a very strong PR team where all you see of Akshay Patra... Are you getting it? Yeah? See? It's really incredible. I used to notice that when I was using Google, and I don't think it happens with DuckDuckGo, but certainly with Google it happens. So they have a very strong, they have flyers, they have nice looking slide decks, which gives everyone the impression. And I don't know, have any of you ever eaten at these ISKCON temples? You have, okay. So basically, you all have this impression that it's so cool, right? This food is so tasty, and it's vegetarian. It's all right. I'm also very happily vegetarian. I'm as happy a vegetarian as I am a non-vegetarian. I don't have anything against not vegetarian food. I love it. But the thing is that they have reached enough people in urban areas and fed. I have eaten there once in my life, and more or less, yeah, it was a nice meal is what I remember. And then you carry that impression that, this is the food that, those are the kinds of kitchens that are serving children. But actually that's not necessarily the case. We don't know what they're giving children. They must be giving something decent only. But the fact is that they're getting a huge subsidy from the government. They get the grain free of cost. Plus they get the conversion costs. And because they have centralized kitchens, they're also killing off a lot of employment. Because in other schools in the rest of the country, it's women who are being, about 20 lakh women, I think, across the country are employed as cooks and helpers. So it's generating employment for them. And of course, some of their children study in these same schools. So they're obviously not going to do shortcuts in the cooking because they care about those children as much. So anyway, so these vegetarian lobbies, I think the Akshay Patra thing is much more based on their religious beliefs. But I think the kind of resistance that we've seen in Madhya Pradesh has not really been about the religion, even though it's the Jain community there that has resisted it when the proposal has come up. But the Jains are just like 1% of the population in Madhya Pradesh or in the country also perhaps. And it's very unlikely that their children are going to these government schools, right? And on top of that, nobody's telling their children nobody's force-feeding eggs to anyone. But in spite of that, this resistance is quite vocal when it comes. And I think the main problem is that they don't want to commit the money. That it is religious beliefs actually is just the mukhota, the charade, yeah? That actually they don't want to be, get tied into this commitment of giving eggs because they know that once they give once a week, then we will ask for twice a week, and then we will say give it every day, which is what Tamil Nadu is doing, and I think even Andhra Pradesh gives 3-4 times a week. So I think this is a big problem now, and they're kind of intertwined also, these kinds of religious beliefs where somebody is able to say you don't eat this or you eat. Nobody says you eat that yet, but they do say don't eat this. But I think it's the same, right? I'm not forcing anyone to eat anything they don't want to eat. So why should anyone force me to not eat what I want to eat? It's exactly the same. The other lobby that I think we have to be very, very, very concerned about, and this is a recurring theme, so I'll talk about it in the other slides also, is these corporate lobbies. So again, this is a favorite story of mine. One second. I also want to check the time. What time should I go to? 3:15? 3:30? Fine. Okay. So in 2008, some of you must have heard I do feel bad because I repeat some of my stories I repeat. Sometimes I have new stories to tell. But in 2008, this is a very old story as you can see, but it's something we must never forget. Sab yaad rakha jayega wala hisab hai. In 2008, they suddenly the education minister, so the midday meal program is run by the education ministry, what used to be human resource development. It was Arjun Singh. I think he's passed away now. Arjun Singh's ministry was getting flooded with letters saying midday meals bad, fortified biscuits good. These are the reasons, ABC, XYZ. So why don't you give fortified biscuits to children? So bureaucrats in the ministry were wondering, language bhi sab mein same hai. How come this language phrases are being repeated across party line? MPs from across party line were writing to the ministry. One of them actually stapled a 2-pager. What happened is that something called the Biscuit Manufacturers Association sent this briefing material to all MPs, 2-page note, from which some MPs were copy-pasting and passing on, okay, please consider. Some were endorsing it very forcefully, some were saying, haan, dekh lo, this is related to your ministry, why don't you take a look? And so basically this Biscuit Manufacturers Association was thinking of the midday meal program, which at that time had a budget of 5,000 crores, as a huge market, right? They thought that we will put our biscuits instead of midday meal programs, and then, this is like fantastic for all of them. And thankfully, the ministry at that time, they wrote to the National Institute of Nutrition, they wrote to the Planning Commission, and they wrote to one other place, and they sought feedback. And all of them said, this is a totally cuckoo idea. You can't replace food with biscuits, right? After, this is being recorded, no? Okay, after the recording is over, I will remind me to tell you my own story about biscuits. So anyway, thankfully the idea was shelved, but these lobbies are continuing to to lobby because now they see these budgets as a big market for their products. So there is a push to introduce pre-packed, ready-to-eat foods in the ICDS. The kind you get on the flight where you add hot water and then it becomes poha or upma. I'm not sure. I mean, it's okay. You eat that because, it's a flight, but you don't want to eat that instead of real food all the time, no? So, and of course, then there will be quality control issues if you move to that kind of thing. I'm not sure about the nutritional aspect of those kinds of food. And especially in rural areas where it is possible with some creative thinking to provide a nutritious meal to a child, you can have a papaya tree and a drumstick tree, and I think even that will sort out the child's nutrition for a substantial part. So these lobbies are very much in the wings. They take different shapes and forms. This is one example, but I'll come back to more. Oh, here's another example right on the next slide. So the other big corporate lobby is the tech industry. And of course, it's sweet joy to talk about the tech industry in Bangalore. And how it's eyeing these markets also. So here, I think I put these links because I thought maybe I'll open those pages to show you what I mean. But, there's this thing that in the ICDS, and this is big headlines every now and then, Poshan Abhiyan. Now there is Poshan Abhiyan. What is this Poshan Abhiyan? About 70% of the budget was dedicated to buying smartphones and the software on it to give to Anganwadi workers. Yeah? And actually now what you find is that we are almost at the stage where the money that is spent on the monitoring and surveillance of the schemes is almost more than the money that is spent on the eggs and food and education and immunization that is provided to them. And this is true also in terms of effort that the Anganwadi workers are putting in. That basically earlier, there was a problem. I'm not saying there isn't a problem of accountability of Anganwadi workers. Many of them, there was a time when many of them didn't show up to work. If they went to work, they didn't really do very much with the work, with the children that they were supposed to serve. But a lot of that changed in many states without these surveillance technologies. And now what has happened is because of a handful of truant Anganwadi workers, all Anganwadi workers across the country are being told every day they have to punch in 2 million things into the smartphone, which may or may not work in their area. And in some cases, they're also being told to maintain paper records because the transition is not complete. And so now the Anganwadi workers have less and less time to spend on the children or with the children. Because more time, already they were burdened by record keeping work, and now even more time, especially where both records are being maintained, is devoted to record keeping. And in spite of all this, of course, they can still cheat on work, right? You could, so we encountered one in the Jacha Bacha survey in 2019. I think it was either in MP or in UP. One of the Anganwadi workers, she used to, so one of the things they have to do is they have to upload photographs of the children eating their meal. Yeah? This must be some IIT student. I didn't say that, expunged from the record. So, what does she do? Once a week, she makes lots of different things. And then she just turns the camera around from different angles and she takes different photos of the children. One with Shira, one with Poha, one with Anda, one with whatever. And over the next week, she uploads different photographs. And now whether on that particular day she fed them any of those 7 things, we don't know. But I'm just saying that this is just an example of how all these surveillance or whatever technologies, accountability technologies can be anyway. The real way to ensure a change in the work culture is one, for the parents to be aware of what their children are supposed to be getting at the Anganwadi, and 2 is to also motivate the Anganwadi workers, to give them pride and joy in their work so that they themselves, start doing it well. And, it certainly has happened even in the North Indian states. So I do think it's possible to do with a little bit of effort. But the thing is that these programs don't really get enough priority. So this ICDS CAS is one such program which is funded by guess who? By the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which has its finger in every pie, every single pie across the country, across ministries. And I think if any of you are interested in research, this is really a topic ripe for once, many years ago, with my students at IIT Delhi, we filed an RTI with the Health Ministry saying, please give us a list of your consultants and who they are employed by. And there were like 200 odd consultants in the Health Ministry employed by everyone under the sun, from BCG to PricewaterhouseCoopers to Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And sometimes it says UNDP, but it will be a program of the UNDP, and when you click on that program, who is funding it? Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So, these links were supposed to be an example of that. UNICEF is supposed to be a multilateral agency, but they are getting now, I think again, this is something that needs much more research. They're getting substantial share of their funds from philanthropies of all kinds. I'm picking on Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation because they are a big player in the field. I think they're also one of the more damaging players in the field. If you're interested in some of this work, there's a journalist called Tim Schwab who has been documenting what the TIMSCHWAB. He's on Twitter, so you should just follow him on Twitter. So in the vaccine policy also, I think he was tracking some of their work, but he has other stuff as well. So then I thought, so the children's programs are really important. I thought I'll start with that because I tend to get carried away when PDS comes along because I've just worked so long on the PDS. But in terms of nutritional impact and importance, I think the children's programs are much more important. So what are the different things about the PDS that perhaps one needs to worry about? One is this sudden move to cash transfers. It's a very enticing idea for a lot of people in economics, in public policy. It just seems so simple. You open a bank account, you put money in the bank account. People, tum jano, tumhara kaam jane, as we say in Hindi. It's between you and your money. You go figure what you want to do with it. Until, of course, you talk to people and you find out that they have very good reasons to be worried about cash transfers. So one respondent in that 2000, it was one of the surveys in which like I learned so much, which is true of all surveys, but there's just something quite special about that one. Like the kinds of nuanced arguments that people were giving us in favor of food or cash were just really mind-blowing. So one of the women or men, I can't remember, they said कि अभी सरकार अभी tension उठाती है. When there's a PDS system, it is the government's tension, right? They have to figure where they'll buy the grain from, how they will transport it, where it will be stocked and stored, how it will come to my village. All I have to do is show up at my ration shop and buy my grain. अगर cash आएगा, तो सारी tension हमको उठानी पड़ेगी. We will be going from one place to another. So basically the government is passing on all their transaction costs to us poor people, and it makes so little sense to do it. And similarly, they had all kinds of arguments which I think we would not have been able to anticipate based on the literature in this field, of which there is a lot. So one which is worth reporting is those who oppose cash often do it on the grounds that people will spend it on drinking. Yeah? And so in one village, one of the, or actually many respondents said this, but that one respondent in Odisha sticks in my head. He said, don't do it. This is a bad idea. And it was a man, it was a group of men who had come to us in the evening after our survey was over. They said, don't do it, it's a bad idea because आदमी लोग दारू पी लेंगे. So he himself is an आदमी, he's saying आदमी लोग दारू पी लेंगे. So I said, no, the proposal is to put the money in a woman's account. So he said, okay, fine. No, they went away. After half an hour, he came back and he said, no, even that is not a good safeguard because the men will beat up the women and snatch the money and do it. But even more interesting than this were the people who said that don't give us the choice. Don't put money in our cash and don't put us in this situation of temptation. And in that person's mind, the temptation was not alcohol. He was like, if I go to the bank to withdraw this cash, and if I go with my son or grandchild, and then the grandchild will say, I want a pencil or I want a toffee, and then I will think, let me get a BD for myself. So little treats, they're 1 rupee treats. But for them, every rupee counts, right? And so they said, like with food, we don't have any tension. It can only go to one place, which is where it belongs, which is our stomach. So there were all kinds of interesting things, but the cash lobbies are very much around. 2-3 years ago, 4 years ago, maybe it was in the economic survey, and I'm sure it will come back again. It's like, what's the thing where you slay the head and it, the mythical character. Sorry? Yeah. So, this is very much like that. It will keep coming back, so beware. Corruption is the other big thing that never seems to go away. And so earlier when I was talking about the PDS, I talked about how things have improved or had improved. And then now again, I think we're in a kind of data black hole where we don't know what the situation on the ground is. There were older forms of corruption which went away substantially after the National Food Security Act was rolled out between 2013 to 2016. One big component of that was what we know, that the government called the Apl Quota. So I should only get into that story if there's time. But maybe I'll keep it for the discussion. But what we are finding is that something like the Apl Quota. So basically, in a nutshell, the problem was that the central government was giving to state governments under the Apl Quota for Apl card holders. Apl is above poverty line. Meanwhile, Apl card holders were not used to getting grain anymore. In any case, for a whole decade, 95 to 2005, Apl prices were close to market prices. So they were also not interested. But in 2007-8, there was an international food price crisis. Market prices shot up and became double of what they were. And so the states became interested in the Apl quota because good states like Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Kerala were buying from the central government at APL prices, which was still lower than the market price, and using it to give to the entire population, to run a universal PDS system, because the central government otherwise was only giving for BPL card holders. The bad states, like Madhya Pradesh, UP, they were taking from the central government, only either siphoning off at the go-down level or max sharing with the dealer. It never went down to the card holder. We're afraid that something like that may be happening now with the COVID quota. That the way the government did the doubling of the ration, which I think was a really important thing to do, especially in the lockdown period and a few months also after that. But they do it only for 3 to 6 months at a time. And we read about it in the newspapers, but we are not interested parties. In rural areas, in many parts, still people don't know that they're supposed to be getting 10 kilos per month per person. And recently so this was my hypothesis of the UP election, is that the central government is giving double quota to the state. The state has some arrangement with the ration dealers. You take double, you sell off the COVID ration on the market, you run the original NFSA quota honestly, which they were not doing before. So everyone is a winner, because ration card holders who were not even getting 5 kilos are getting 5 kilos. Dealers are making a killing because now they get 5 kilos to siphon off every month. And the whole narrative is that the food provisions of COVID helped Yogi win the election. We were in Chaibasa not very long ago, and there actually it was pretty depressing, because that was an area in our 17 survey where we found less than 10% corruption in the PDS. And in this caveat, one village, 300 ration card holders, verified only for 2 months, we found that people were getting only 1/3 of their entitlement. Yeah, so from being cheated only of 10%, it seems to, in those 2 villages, these were supposed to be problem villages. So we were in the worst kind of area. But still, I think it calls for much more scrutiny and widespread scrutiny. I won't go into the farm laws because there's not that much time. And, this would also have jeopardized the PDS if there was no more procurement or not enough procurement and so on. And then there are these corporate lobbies. Aadhaar is my favorite thing to talk about all the damage that it has done, not just in the PDS, but even in other programs. I'm hoping some of you are familiar with that work, but basically it has meant that if you cannot make your fingerprint work at the time that you go to buy your ration, then you will not get your ration. And to what end? Because even if you make your fingerprint work, the person who's selling you the grain can make you put your fingerprint on 35 kilos and give you only 5 or 10 or 20 or whatever he pleases. So it's pain without gain. That was the title of the 2017 paper, that a lot of people are either getting knocked out entirely or they're having to incur greater transaction costs because today I might go, my fingerprint doesn't work, tomorrow I send somebody else in the family, we waste time, server is down, tower nahi aa raha hai, whatever. So people are getting hassled, and there is this uncertainty, right? I mean, remember the time during demonetization, maybe you were too young, but you were standing in that queue in the ATM queue, and just when your turn came, they say cash khatam ho gaya. So it's a little bit like that, right? That, you're standing in this queue every month, you don't know for sure whether you'll get your grain or not. And it depends on the whims and fancies of these technologies that you have no control over, and for no fault of your own. Again, it is a case where 10, 20, 30% ration dealers were corrupt, and for their corruption, innocent and poor people are paying the price with this ridiculous technology. And on top of everything else, is like rubbing salt in their wounds. It's being touted as a huge success internationally. It is now a role model. If you look at the ID4D thing on the World Bank website, you'll see that Aadhaar is like the model to follow. Rice fortification is another one, which is now being rolled out in the PDS. Again, there are huge corporate lobbies and philanthropic lobbies behind all of this. There is a Cochrane review from 2019 which shows that there is very little evidence that fortification of rice can help in combating anemia, because not all anemia is iron deficiency anemia. But if it is iron I don't know if any of you have ever had to have iron tablets for anemia. I have, okay? And it's a huge pain, because first of all, the dose has to be pretty strong. This little chutput rice interspersed is not going to help. The other thing is you have to have it on an empty stomach to improve absorption, right? If you mix it in rice, then it's not going to do anything. And so anyway, there are all those nitty-gritty details. But there is also this Cochrane review which is saying very clearly that rice fortification with iron or even with vitamin A has not had any spectacular effects. What is most remarkable is that last year, the food secretary, that video is online. And he says, we tried a pilot and the pilot was a disaster. And we think that the only way to fix it now is to go the whole hog, because all these supply chains won't fall into place. And it's really worth listening to that. It's a slightly long discussion, but worth every minute of your time. And then, of course, even Indian doctors have been writing. I don't know if you've noticed their writings in Times of India, Indian Express, Hindu, etc., making similar points. And in fact, these two doctors go so far as to say that if you don't suffer from iron deficiency anemia and you are consuming this rice, and it actually has those effects, then it can cause damage also. And the other ridiculous thing is that not everyone is anemic in the country, right? 50%, yeah, but you're putting rice in you're putting this fortified rice in all the PDS. So it's like mismatch of a pretty phenomenal kind. But why they're so enthusiastic about it, nobody has been able to figure out. On this issue of corporate lobbies, philanthropic lobbies, it's not just one particular thing. I'm quite happy to name names, but maybe it's not fair to name names, so I'm just like, these are two people who have been part of these, and it's not, it's kind of an awkward thing to even do a research on, right, where it's a particular person's trajectory which exemplifies the problems with the structure. So this person was at the World Bank, from there went to the Ministry of Rural Development, worked with the minister, from there to Dalberg, and then from Dalberg is now at Omidyar Network. In at least the last 3, Aadhaar has been a very important piece of the, and how easily people are able to. So is this person actually a government person or a corporate person or a philanthropic person or what? It's very hard to decipher whose agenda is getting pushed along. There's another one who's a senior IAS officer, participated in a high-profile RCT as co-PI and co-author, and is now sitting in the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Again, very much a revolving door. And what do they bring, especially the second person, right? What do they bring? They bring access to government, right? I mean, if you have like a secretary level person working in your office, then all his or her batchmates are, so, they're all a phone call away for that person, right? I grew up in Gujarat, and I saw this anecdotally that a lot of IAS officers who retired there within 6 months, 1 year were getting picked up by Torrent and other industries, even IPS officers. And you would wonder, like, what is a retired IPS officer going to do in an industry? The fact is that they're bringing their social network, right, and their access to government. They're opening doors for you. So, all these awkward things somebody has to talk about. I'm doing it for now. Hopefully, some of you will do it in the future. Another very vicious, and this is my last slide, I think. No, it's not. But this is worth talking about. So, historically there is evidence of how the sugar and the tobacco industry were funding research. So, you think research is coming from IIT Delhi, research is coming from Azim Premji University. So, it's a kind of labeling in your head and you think there must be some credibility to it. And I'm picking these examples, although the sugar and tobacco industry examples are from the US. So, they were funding research in these universities there whose function was basically to muddy the scientific evidence. So there would be scientific evidence saying tobacco is going to increase the probability of cancer, and then one study will come along and say, oh, well, hang on a second, that kind of thing. And I feel that O-Media Network is doing something similar in the case of digital technologies in India. That, for us it's very clear how damaging they are, not just to PDS and all that, but to democracy at large. They want to now link voter ID cards, right? So, bach ke rehna bhai. And similarly with BMGF, they have a named scholarship at Oxford or Cambridge. So they've made their inroads into all these institutions which are supposed to be independent of something. And I'm not saying that government sourcing is independent. They are damaging in their own way. But, philanthropies are seen and perceived as being doing good. But actually, unlike governments, there's no accountability also there. At least government you can throw out. What do you do with a big fat cat like Elon Musk, and if he comes along with all his money bags, you're not going to be able to question him. Okay, so the last one, since I talked about, I would say a little bit about COVID. After in the lockdown period, especially, all of us were, moved by what migrant workers who got stuck in urban areas were going through, and it was not just about migrants, it was about urban workers. Yeah, they were all kinds. And then this one nation, one ration became one mantra to fix all their problems. But actually a lot of them didn't have ration cards in the first place, right? So what does portability do for people like that? And in any case, one nation, one ration is going to ride on that Aadhaar platform, which itself is so badly broken. So God only knows what is going to happen. And again in Chaipasa, we found one person who said that if I complain too much about the cheating, so the people who were aware of the cheating that was going on, then he said that the ration dealer, he allocates me to another ration shop. So this portability factor is being used to trouble them, that if you raise your voice too much, I won't give you, you go get it from some other shop. Don't come to me at all. And in rural areas, portability is meaningless, right? Because the next village is going to be so far away, and how are you going to cycle or walk or whatever it is and transport all that rice back? And actually, to me, the obvious solution would have been community kitchens, of which there are many across the country already. Amma's Canteens, of course, is the most the thickest network. They have quite a few. In Karnataka, the previous government was trying, there was a Congress government which started some Indira canteens, but immediately after that, the BJP came to power. So I think they didn't really go very far. Maybe they were revived to some extent during the pandemic, but in the north, we have Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Jharkhand have dal bhat kendras where sometimes they give eggs also. So I think there are options, but basically it's a battle between different lobbies. You can call us also a lobby. People like me who are lobbying for better nutrition or whatever. But we are faced with the corporate lobby, or what was the vegetarian lobby, etc. And unfortunately, at the moment, we are not doing a great job. So I'll stop with that. Thank you for listening patiently. There's no other number. You are deemed dead, or you're deemed to be a ghost or a duplicate, and your name is deleted from the database. So those kinds of things are happening in all kinds of schemes, including these cash. Especially pensions is very devastating because these old people, their awareness levels are very poor. No, they're not even able to figure out. And then suddenly one day she's sitting, she can't walk anymore, and her pension stops coming. Where does she even go to find out? So yeah, this is what I mean by this algorithmic control.
So you talked about you also labeled yourself as a lobbyist for nutrition, and you talked about in terms of like PDS, there are sort of different lobbies that come in, and I was a little unaware of the philanthropic lobbies being a damaging effect, and that if you could shed light on how the Melinda Gates Foundation is actually a damaging effect, and as someone who's interested in the area of nutrition and PDS and the correct delivery of it, which by my understanding, the government, the vegetable lobbies and the corporate lobbies, all of these lobbies look like evils. Which evil would you prefer to actually deliver this? Because we need budgeting for all of these to happen. So which of the lesser evils would you prefer for this system to continue?
I think there's like a big story to be told about BMGF and others also, I'm sure. But I think it basically starts with a very different worldview. That and theirs is a technocratic worldview. So it's a fix-it, depoliticized worldview of public policy making. But that's not going to work, right, in a democratic setting, right? So that is where the problem starts. Now, with that worldview, they, in their own reckoning, they're trying to do good also. But the power that their money accords to them and the doors that it opens to them then also means that there is no that much scope for debate and discussion, right? It's lopsided. And I suppose it's to be expected, but part of trying to level the playing field in the discussion space is to say that you have this unfair advantage over us. So like for instance, this Poshan Abhiyan, I would say if they had 7,000 crores to give, I might just give it for eggs, yeah. Like, out of that, nothing must have gone for eggs. All of it went into this. Some of it is useful. Some of those activities were useful, but a substantial chunk, according to some briefing note, was 70% was on the smartphones, etc., which are third generation issue, I would say. Yeah. And if they're trying to solve the work culture problem, I would even say that is the wrong-headed approach to take. That there are better ways of doing it by improving awareness and helping them also understand and take pride in their work. And then you said, which is the evil? I think it's not about evil. It's about power and holding power to account. And all those who have power have to be held to account. And that's the only way one can make progress. So through discussion and debate and understanding also that when you're sitting at this discussion table, you are bringing a certain kind of power yourself also. But I think that kind of awareness doesn't really... So I would say this is a role of the government. It is problematic, but we have to work with them and we have to work on them.
Like the government also are increasingly in touch with these private companies, and that algorithm route, because for all of these PDS systems, they're all linked to Aadhaar, and then this information then is sold to these private companies, and then all of that again, like which is like a route that goes in, because then our data is sold.
And companies, see, there was this phase of, saying government is bad, right? And so you beat up the government, then obviously who's beating up the government? It's private media beating up the government. They're opening their own doors. So you have to question all along the way, this government good, private bad dichotomy is really dumb, no? Have you seen Dirty Money on Netflix? What is this? You have to watch Dirty Money. Watch Dirty Money. So it's basically about corporate corruption. Anyone who says that corporate is doodh ka dulha has to... But that perception is hard to get rid of. And I'm not saying that we should worship the government, not at all. But I think we have to wield the stick with the government, no, and say that, yeah, they have to be held to account. Wield the stick only, no, I have to clarify because who knows what these words might become.
So I was reading this example a few days back that there was a child who was consuming a midday meal food, and since his birth, he was diabetic, and because of consuming the rice, that got more triggered. So, in that terms, how can PDS or MD midday meal schemes be more inclusive in terms of keeping such nuances also in loop?
So I think there have been lots of people who have been doing work on this, on moving away from wheat and rice in the PDS, which would mean moving away from wheat and rice in the MSP. Right? So the MSP is declared for like 23 items, of which 5 or 7 are food grain items, but it is not actually bought. So I would say that Rajasthan state government should be allowed to buy bajra, Karnataka should be allowed to buy ragi, so that these things can... See, the reason why wheat and rice are supplied through the PDS is because there are these huge stocks. So and in fact, that will be very good if we start moving away, because Punjab is not well suited for growing so much paddy, right? So even there, if they can be slowly weaned away from these unsustainable agricultural practices, it would help agriculture, and then you could also have more location-specific diets, including these kinds of interventions.
So these ration shops should also provide more options in general as well, right?
Yeah, but the ration shops are getting their supply from the government, right? As a dealer, I can't freelance supply whatever I want. I will supply what the government has given to me. If they give me ragi, I will supply ragi.
So I wanted to ask, kind of similar question. If I understand correctly, what is happening right now, that, like rice which is grown somewhere else is coming to, some place. So I'm coming from Jharkhand. So there was these local people used to complain that quality, they used to grow kind of rice with no fertilizer, or what you're talking about, Usna. So, but the rice is provided is like, we don't know what they provide. So first quality thing, and another thing is that also if it's sustainable in the terms of that, why it has to travel all over India, and do you think that there should be some way to kind of like you buy from the area, or maybe at least from region, and then so that will also ensure that if the so for example in Gumla they used to eat ragi a lot. If they are eating whatever, so why they have given rice or wheat? Yeah.
I think the point is very valid, that first of all you have to take into account local tastes, but also nutritional requirements. Sometimes maybe you want to push people a little bit, like people may not be aware of the fact that ragi is more nutritious than rice. And then maybe some kinds of nudges are necessary to help them understand that they should mix the two, or, have a balance between the two. And I'm not sure if anyone is doing work on the supply logistics, but I would imagine that by now that some of it is quite streamlined, because I know from Chhattisgarh, most parts are arva rice. But before they started procuring themselves in 2003-04, they were getting usna rice supplies from somewhere else. And that's why people were very unhappy, because they were arva rice eating people and they were being forced to buy usna from the PDS. But since the state started buying on its own, doing a lot of local procurement, they are now supplying arva rice from the state stocks. So that problem has been resolved, at least in one state. And it's not just about the variety, it's also just even about the cost. And I don't work on the supply logistics part of this, but I think they must have streamlined this so that at least the distance is minimized. If there are food deficit states, like I think Kerala doesn't grow enough food grain for itself, it will need from some other part of the country. And I would imagine that they are getting it from the nearest state that has an excess stock.
Do you think does it have any health effect also in terms of kind of quality of rice? Because I was giving you example that they used to eat rice, kind of, we can't say organic, but natural way they were growing and they were eating. And then, so earlier, in terms of, if I'm not wrong, in Jharkhand, they used to give in wheat, and then these people used to eat rice, so they forced and they protested and that things changed now. But again, I'm talking about the quality of rice. So, do you think that will have some health implications, and
so
there should be something?
Yeah, so I don't really work on rice varieties and the nutritive content, etc. And in our surveys, just as far as the quality of grain is concerned, these complaints have gone down quite a bit. So there is still about 10% people who will say, "Acha nahi aata," ya 10 mahine mein ek bar kharab aata hai. But by and large, it's not bad. And one very remarkable thing which I would not have imagined could happen when I started working on when I did my first surveys in 2002 during my PhD work. And it was really like a dark well. I couldn't understand how people could be so lost, right? And at that time, there were complaints of bad quality. And if somebody had told me at that time that a day will come when bad quality rice or wheat is supplied, that people will reject it and that the dealer will replace it, I would not have believed it. But actually, we do see that happening once in a while now. Every here and there, they'll say कि हाँ वो उस महीने में खराब supply आया था, and people protested. So now the dealer himself will return it because he knows that if he starts giving this bad rice, udhar se juta padega. So little bit, I think, I'm not saying this is the norm, but I'm saying at least it's becoming the norm for people to question and to push back a little bit.
So my question is a little bit similar to the role of the state in diversifying the PDS. So I wanted to understand, is it just a structural problem, or is it such a historical events that happened in colonial era, mercantile capitalism, and then the wonderful Green Revolution, which changed the way we grew our crops. So what could be the reason why they are not being able to diversify it?
I think the Green Revolution definitely played a very important part in making the procurement of wheat and rice such a big thing. Why did that happen? Because the rice varieties were the first ones or wheat varieties were the first ones to be developed. So that did trigger a certain chain of events. And I think that there could have been course correction. Now, why there hasn't been course correction, especially given the fact that, these water tables are receding in Punjab. Why was it picked for growing rice when actually Bihar and, West Bengal would have been much better suited for pushing those varieties? I have not done research on those things. So it's hard for me to answer the question about why course correction didn't happen. Were there questions being raised at that time? I don't know because I don't work on this. But I still feel that even now people should apply their mind to, there must be all kinds of things. I mean, if I sit in, if I'm just thinking aloud now, okay? I live in Delhi. I think win-win situation hai. Udhar unko bolo to stop growing. It's the paddy crop, which they burn. Huh? वो उससे हमको pollution होता है. Paddy is causing damage to Punjab farmers. उनको बोलो ना बदल दो. They will be, adopting sustainable agricultural practices and our pollution problem will come down a little bit. But there must be all kinds of complications and thing, which I don't know about because I don't work on this. So I think it is for those who work on agriculture and these issues to, apply their mind to figuring out what is the thing to do next. But until that is resolved, I don't see any harm in the government actually procuring bajra, ragi, jwar, whatever, from other parts of the country. Why hold up those? Because those are locally suited and there will be enough of a market through ICDS, midday meals, even PDS. Usi mein they will be able to use a lot of it. And the MSP is lower. So the budget for the government is also win-win all three ways, because they will still say we are procuring, they will get goodwill, but they will be spending less money because the prices are lower than rice and wheat. But like I said, I'm not an expert. There must be reasons why these things are not happening, which I don't know about.
Hello, ma'am. Thank you, first of all, for a lovely session. Ma'am, I have two questions. So my first question is, throughout your talk, you didn't come off as biggest proponent of technology when it comes to the public service delivery. So I just want to understand from you, what are those specific kind of public service deliveries, for example, PDS, where you feel like technology is not perhaps the best solution? And my second question is regarding the stunting and wasting situation in India. Like repeatedly, after government efforts and everything, we are still performing quite badly on hunger index. And recently in NFH's survey, we find that many of the well-performing states like Kerala, Goa, Maharashtra, they are performing very badly on stunting and wasting scenarios. So can you just shed a little bit light on that also?
I have to say that I'm not anti-technology. I'm anti-biometric technology in the PDS. I'm anti-Aadhaar. I am for SMS alerts being sent to people that your ration has arrived. I am for computerization of records of the PDS because that facilitates and increases administrative capacity. I'm against technologies which deplete administrative capacities, and I think Aadhaar is one such technology. Other than Aadhaar, I'm not sure what... so I think Aadhaar is one type of surveillance technology, so I would say that those which fall in that ambit, I would be very cautious about using. But other technologies, I'm not against. That is a horror show. You should go and see yourself. I think that's the other thing, that though until it happens to oneself, people are not able to understand how disempowering it is. If you have to do some work, and it gets held up because there is an extra space between your first name and your second name in the Aadhaar database, and that is tripping up the linking of your bank account with your Aadhaar number, and your scholarship money or whatever it is doesn't come, then I think then it will be like, I think now I begin to get it. And I think the other thing is that for people like us, we still manage to figure a way out, no? You will find, do you know somebody who does this fake? So, usko do yaar, 500 rupees, baat khatam karo. Poor people can't do this. They wouldn't even know where to start. Poor people know, but like a lot of people in India would not be able to. And then on stunting and all of that, I have not looked very carefully at the data. So again, I have to say that I don't know the answer. I think it's a more general point, not related to the NFHS results that have been released, is that on children's programs, we don't spend enough. We didn't put enough attention. Yeah, so maternity entitlements, ICDS, they are really important. Now, even those maternity entitlements at a time when the woman is pregnant and she needs rest, what is she being asked to do? आधार कार्ड में मायके का एड्रेस है और बाप का नाम है, उसको अपडेट करो, उसमें ससुराल का एड्रेस डालो और हस्बैंड का नाम डालो. उसको कराने में वो 10 चक्कर लगा रही है with her baby and for 5,000 rupees. So these children's programs basically need much more of a boost financially and of course in terms of implementation as well.
Hi, Mom. In terms of, so I was thinking in terms of the monitoring of these programs. Of course, I also don't think like tech surveillance should be the way forward for this. But in your research, have you come across some examples of how, without using these, it probably worked out, and I mean, some form of hope probably in that space?
No, so Chhattisgarh is a great example. Okay, so just one, since you asked, one of the big leakage points in the PDS in Chhattisgarh and perhaps in other states was that the dealer would be told, "Ki go down, say get your ration." Okay, so the dealer would arrange a truck, and basically the truck would never reach the village with the quantity that it left the go down from. So what was happening is he would stop in the open market somewhere, sell off all the grain or half of it or whatever, go to the village and say, "Dekho, you know, FC high, there's so much corruption. They've only given me 40%. So now either everyone takes 40% or the first 40% who come get it and the others are." So what did Chhattisgarh do? They painted all the delivery trucks yellow. They told the dealers, "Don't move your to get the grain. We will give it to you." Doorstep delivery. That is the original meaning of doorstep delivery in the PDS, which is that the grain will be delivered to the ration shop. And the trucks would be state government commissioned or contracted trucks. They painted all of them yellow. On those yellow trucks, in big letters, they put a toll-free number for complaints. Now, people understood very quickly that a yellow truck is carrying PDS grain. Where should a PDS grain be offloading its grain? It should be at a ration shop. So if they saw it offloading the grain anywhere else, what did they do? They read the number on the truck and they called and complained. So that was one very clever idea. And actually, I don't think they need to do it anymore. I don't think those yellow trucks exist still. Maybe some leftovers might be there. But after that initial push, after this cleanup happened, it's like a new equilibrium has been reached and it's kind of sustaining itself now. So that's one example. But another thing that, to clean up these lists which were supposed to have fakes and ghosts and duplicates, a simple thing is just to paste them on the Gram Panchayat wall, right? Everyone in the village will be able to tell you whether this person exists or not. So there are simpler ways of doing it. And then awareness, I think, is like the magic bullet. If people know, almost like a magic bullet. I'm taking back my initial, almost like a magic bullet, because I think once people figure it out, then they can do a lot on their own. And of course they need, you need support from the system as well, that if I blow the whistle, then you will take action and not just like knock me off or something. But I think it makes a huge difference.
Ma'am, yeah. So I come from a place, peri-urban area, that is Bangalore East. I come from a village that is Mandur Panchayat. So I have worked with this Panchayat and all, like in the PDS. So I would like to disagree with you this biometric thing. Why? I need to understand your perspective on this. When before biometric, there were like that yellow lorry used to come. That we never used to identify when the yellow lorry or the ration used to come to the main center. So what used to happen is that the person was supposed to get 30 to 35 kgs of rice per family. Before biometric, I have seen in my village, so that I have worked closely in that. So all the person, irrespective of their economic income, everything, so-called those who were earning 50,000, they also were getting PDS, and those who are getting 15,000, they are also were getting PDS, and those who are not working also, they were also getting PDS. right? So when even the panchayat members were not able to speak against them because the vote bank is there, right? So and the third thing in when the biometric came, in my village there are around 100 SC/ST families. These SC families, what they used to do is that, okay, so I'm telling before biometric, right? So they used to go to the someone else used to go to the shop and they used to buy the rice, and they used to sometimes they used to sell in the shop itself, in the PDS ration shop itself, so that they used to get the money instead of rice. They used to get the money, right? So it was not. There was no accountability that who is to take the rice and who is to take the ration, that PDS and all. But once this biometric came, there were in my village, I have the exact number that there are 120 families that are getting PDS a thing, right? So once this PDS came, there were many families that that were what do you call the many people who were when this Aadhaar and all they came, that many people who were around at least 30 to 40 PDS were deleted in a genuine way, but because they were having very good income thing and all. So in that case, won't be a I'm just giving my example that in that case won't be and also right now it is not, if I am the member of if I am the family, that only I should go and get the PDS, right? So in that case won't be that easy. This biometric will help, this technology will help for a family that, oh okay, every month I will get an SMS that I should go and get, I only should go and get. And also you will have the accountability, the person who is selling the ration thing will have the accountability that this much he has to sell. It is not that, okay, I will give him my thumbprint that he will give 25 kgs. No, it won't happen like that. It is that the system will be displayed over there, that I have seen there. I have worked. Yeah.
So I'll tell you the.
But this all will not be applicable because we are in a diverse thing. One thing, what is experiencing in my panchayat may not be the same in the other panchayat. Biometric may be efficient for my panchayat, but it is efficient for my panchayat because I have worked there. It is very difficult for the people. Even the thing is that although the panchayat members, they tell that, you should be aware and you should spread awareness, there is always a collaborative thing. Okay, anyhow, I am taking, you also take. Let it be, no problem. It doesn't matter. 35 kgs, no, let it, everyone take. So in that case, it will be very difficult for the people even to. So, I mean, I hope you got my thing correct.
Can I answer?
Yeah.
Okay, so the first point is that there were rich people also getting PDS grain, and you are somehow associating the removal of rich people with the biometrics. But my biometrics will not tell anyone about whether I'm rich or poor. That has happened from a completely different exercise, which is that after the National Food Security Act was enacted, every state decided these are our criteria. We have been told by the central government that we can give ration cards to 50, 60, 80% of our population. Now we are going to apply some inclusion or exclusion criteria to determine who those 50, 60 or 80% people are going to be. And so I don't know about Karnataka, like I said earlier, but in states like Jharkhand, they said all SC and all ST will be included automatically. All income tax paying people will be excluded automatically. Okay? So from that, they were able to say who is in and who is out. And a similar exercise must have happened in Karnataka, where the state decided these are the criteria by which we will give priority households.
All the PPL card holders will get this PDS.
Sorry?
All the PPL card holders.
So the determination of who gets a BPL card has zero relationship with biometrics. It is not biometric based to say I will give you a BPL card or I will not give you a BPL card. That is a completely different exercise. And if you want, I will send you some papers to read on this part.
I'm telling that using of this PDS, like if I am the family, right, biometric will make sure that this family got this ration.
Now I'm coming to that part. You, in your initial comments, you said that when biometrics came, that some people who had 50,000 rupees income were knocked out. It has nothing to do with biometrics. The second question is that with biometrics, you are notionally saying that this person has got the grain. I feel that, those who were being cheated before, and this is not based on one village and you or yourself said that this is the situation in your village. In northern states, today it is common, and we have seen it not 10 days ago, that people are putting their thumbprint for 10 kgs and they are getting 4 kgs. It is displayed on the screen, like you said. But they are being forced, they're taking 4 kilos because they are scared to raise their voice. Or because the literacy rates are so poor that they don't know that the display is saying 10 kilos and they are being given only 4 kilos. So the biometric safeguard is a very limited safeguard. And you said that, one person, I should only get it. There is a corollary to that. In some of these rural areas, again, my experience is mostly North India based, a lot of old people who used to ask their neighbors to go and get their ration for them no longer can do it. Yeah, they are bedridden, they can't walk, or, for all kinds of reasons, or I'm too busy this month, why don't you get it? That door has been closed on them. And on top of that, there are others whose fingerprints are not working. So why should they be punished? There should be some option for them, no? The whole village knows that I'm Reetika. But the biometric machine is not recognizing my fingerprint, and because of that, the dealer cannot give me my grain. So is it worth it? Ultimately, the question is there enough gain from this technology to justify the pain to those who are experiencing it? And in our surveys, which are not in Karnataka, we have felt that the pain is far greater than any possible benefit from it. The cheating has continued as before, where there was cheating. In any case, we felt that the cheating had come down. Other safeguards that were put in place.
So I think that biometrics should be there, but at the same time, there should be other options for the people to include. It is not that...
I think that the biometric should not be there, and when people complain about a particular dealer, the government should take action against that dealer. For that one dealer, why should all the people across the country be paying the price by being vulnerable to this technology? There is a more direct route. If 5 people out of 10 are doing the corruption, why should all 10 people be punished? No, those 5 people are easily identifiable. In the entire chain of the PDS, we know exactly where the corruption is happening. So why are we making things difficult for poorer people instead of just going after the middle layer, which is the dealer layer? To me, it makes no sense.
But for me, it's not a whole. It's a universal thing. It depends upon the state and the region also. In my panchayat, I think that it is useful. But yeah, in Gauribidur Taluk, that is in Andhra border, that I worked for 1 year. Even there I have worked. Even there, I think it is useful. Might be your experience, and I agree on that. It is needed. But what my question is that is we instead of focusing on direct that okay, this is the thing, should not given up, because this is a structural...
I think that is something we can agree on, that there shouldn't be one size fits all solutions. I'm happy to concede, but I would still say that you should go and see other places before you make up your mind on this issue. I think Vivek is here, no? You should have some conversations with Vivek, who comes from a very different part of the country and who can tell you from experiences from Garhwa.
One last question. Keep it short. Hi.
So thank you for the presentation. My question is on the part where you said the fortification, the inclusion of fortification in the PDAs, fortificated rice would be a little bit problematic. More than problematic. So I have a bit of knowledge about nutrition as I have read it in my undergrad. So what we study at the level of, at UG when it comes to fortification, it is actively included in prophylaxis programs such as vitamin A deficiency prophylaxis program. You use fortificated food products. Then it comes into the category of smart food. So there is one thing that my professor used to say, that it's a shotgun method which you can use. Shotgun method. Just put fortified food in the mouth and then you get rid of the thing. The way you said that fortification of food would be problematic because it has very different biological implications. It has political implications also. So it would the reason for that is only the economization of nutrition, or also that government do not want to get into direct transaction or engagement with the problem, because fortification of food comes into play when it is about hidden hunger, problem with deficiencies among women or children, not for a whole population. That is what I wanted to know. Is it because only to legitimize corporate-based lobbies, or it is the reason is the government is also not trying to get into that directly?
Right. So I think it's a bit of both, right? It creates the impression of, we are taking this seriously and we are doing something, without actually going after what needs to be done, which is to think about children and women. So when you make a grand thing of fortification, then you give the impression to the lay person that the government is taking nutrition seriously. It's going to the extent of fortifying rice, and that happens to benefit certain people on the side, but actually you're not really tackling the real problem, which might be patriarchal structures and why women suffer from poor nutrition in the first place. So I'm not sure if I got your question right, but I think it is both the economic realization of nutrition as well as this political part, which is to try and get away easily without taking it head on. Did I answer you? We can talk offline, as they say.
Thanks a lot. It has been very enriching, and also a lot of questions. I think people have been very actively engaging in the topic, I guess. So look forward to many studies coming from food and nutrition and food equality and distribution. I think more specific to those kind of studies. Thank you so much, Reetika. We have enjoyed a lot.
And thanks to those of my wonderful students who walked into this hall at 2:30 and who stayed with us throughout the talk. Next colloquiums on the calendar would be conversations with Nirmala Gowda and her team at Pani.earth, about Arkavati and her sisters. This is an initiative of mapping Bengaluru's rivers and trying to tell us about the ecological health that our rivers are portraying to us. Many of you would, before Nirmala and her team comes and speaks to you about Arkavati and her sisters, would like to try and see on Google and Google Earth and on Pani.earth what is a neighborhood river, and can you go and smell the water